are some of the do's and don'ts in working with an agent after they have accepted representation? Agents lead on what kind of communication they like. For me, my clients can always call me to say hello and chat for a couple of minutes, just to say what's up, how are you, just checking in. If they have a real question, if they want to know, okay, I know my manuscript is with 9 places, and I know you're planning on sending it out to a few other houses. What's up with that? I really like an email saying, can we talk at such and such a time tomorrow? Because I like to, get my Excel chart out. I want to make sure everything's up to date, make sure I've done everything I said I was going to do. So follow your agent's lead in terms of communication. And very important, especially in this time of social media, never, ever discuss any business, and this goes for editors or agents, any business on any kind of social media. No details of your deals, no details of how the negotiations are going, nothing about how you feel about working with the agent. Really, I guess it's okay to say something positive, but there are always going to be times when there's conflict. If someone you trust and like wants to know how it's going with your agent, do it privately, especially if there's some criticism involved. And just be cautious about what you say on Twitter and Facebook and things like that. Very cautious, both about your agent and about negotiations with. Oh, okay. Should you keep querying and wait to hear back on your partials and fulls? Lydia, that sounds to me like you are doing things exclusively. And if the agents you're querying request an exclusive, then yes, you should wait to hear back. On the other hand, if they don't, and I don't know too many who do right now, if they don't request an exclusive, then I would put it out there as broadly as possible. It's a tough business. You have to take every opportunity you can. It may not be fair, but we all know, we have to, move quickly if we want something. That's why it's very important to keep someone in the loop if another agent decides that they are interested. If they've asked for your full, then you want to let the other agents who've got your query know that someone wants your full, just to keep them in the loop. Do agents or editors shy away from manuscripts written in unconventional or unusual formats? Well, I guess it depends on how unconventional and how unusual and how well it suits your subject matter, your voice, the story, a lot of things. If you are talking about a book that has hi Kelly, if you're talking about a book that you want to have a CD in, or you want a pop-up page in the middle of your middle grade novel, good luck, because that costs money, and it's very hard to make that kind of thing work. So I can't really think of, an unconventional or unusual format I would probably say, as a general rule, since I can't tell exactly what you're getting at, shoot for the widest target. So if you're writing a picture book, don't talk about a CD or a pop-up in the middle of it. If you're writing a middle grade novel and you want to have a graphic novel 4-color insert in the middle of it, and you're not a graphic novelist, and you're not a colorist or an inker or a letterer, I wouldn't suggest it, okay? Do a graphic novel, fine, but don't make it too tricky. This year. I'm going to Ohio in September, and as far as, I think that's about it, really. I think that's about it for me. Lynn, how long do editors usually take to respond to the agented submission? It varies. It varies wildly. It varies on the agent. It varies depending on the time of year. Summer is extremely slow. The holidays are very slow. You have that golden window of September, October, and November until Thanksgiving, and then February, March, April, and May before summer. it can be a long time. I mean, I've had people respond to things in 2 days and say they want to buy it. And I've had people, I still have things. I mean, I was an editor for years, and sometimes my own good friends who are editors are the slowest at responding. So there's no way to tell. Okay. Any guidance and tips for your manuscript? Is it okay to requery the agent down the road when your manuscript has been revisited? Let's see. A smart agent, well, I shouldn't say smart, a cautious agent or editor, or one who was sort of raised editorially the way I was, old school, speaks in code. And if they want to see something, they say it. If they want to see it again. If they see something of merit in what you've done, but don't want to see it again, they will spend some time giving you feedback, but they won't say a word about seeing it again. So that's kind of the old school way. Some of the new senior editors are 26, and they haven't sort of been through the process that a lot of the older editors have. So it's hard to say. But my guess is if they haven't specifically said, I want to see it again, then they don't. I'm something of an anachronism. My mentor in trade publishing was Tony Marquette, who was trained by Ursula Nordstrom, who was probably the greatest children's book editor ever. So, the way I learned, it's not available to people anymore, sadly, except the people I can pass it on to and all of the people who worked with Tony over the years. Let's see. An agent read your full and passed. Would you mention this when you query a new book? I probably would, just, as full disclosure. It won't necessarily hurt your case or help your case. It just lets them know exactly, where they've seen that name before. Okay. What kind of books do I represent, and what kind of book do I have a hard time putting down? Okay, I represent, well, here's another example of one of the joys of being an agent. I represent books that speak to me personally, that I love. And I learned this from Charlotte Sheedy, who is another person who, actually she convinced me to start my own agency. Charlotte represents books that speak to her. She represented Sapphire's book Precious, which was the movie that came out last year with Gabrielle Sidibe, which was a very, very harsh and difficult book to read for adults. And she represented Daniel Handler and Lemony Snicket. If a book spoke to her, she represented it. And the rationale for that, from Charlotte and for me as well, is I can't sell something that I don't really love, that doesn't speak to me in a particular way. I had to do that a lot as an editor because you're often handed books or you have a mandate to do a certain number of books. But it's so much easier to sell something if you really care about it than if you are saying, well, it's a great fantasy, fantasy's hot, it's well written, it's got good characters. All of that's true, but if it doesn't really speak to me, it's hard to sell. What kind of book do I have a hard time putting down? Right now I'm reading Mind Blind by Jennifer Roy. It is not out yet, it's coming out in October. I have the Bound Galley. It's fabulous. It's a first-person account of a boy with Asperger's syndrome, and it is riveting. I read, I have very Catholic tastes. You can see that's about a third of my bookcase back there. I read all sorts of stuff. The things I don't read are fantasy, sci-fi, pure romance, but I like horror, I like paranormal, I like love stories, gothic stuff, graphic novels, nonfiction, you name it. What's next? Let's see. How is the agent to editor submission process different or alike from the writer to agent? Well, that's a good question. That's a very good question. It's not that different, except the agent to editor process is built on a relationship. It's built on their knowledge of my level of taste and commitment, and my background, and also what I'm like to work with. There are some people who are harder to work with than others. I think having been an editor, I really try to smooth the process for everyone. And the editors that I've worked with in the last 16 months or so have really appreciated that. I know, because I know when writers get stuck, and I know how to help a writer deal with that, and I know when editors need things, and I know how to convey that a particular way to the writer, how to problem solve. So that's actually not a difference in process, but that's a difference in perception. Would I want to know if a writer's been previously agented? Yes, I think that's a good thing to note. You don't have to go into details because all good things come to an end. There are, you could have had a great run with an agent, but it's time to move on. It doesn't have to have been acrimonious. And that's always my assumption when someone comes to me and says, I've left my agent and I'm looking for a new one. I assume the best. They had a good run and that was it. So yeah, it's good to tell. Should agents share all rejections or comments from publishers with authors? Well, they should definitely let all, whenever something is passed on, which I like to use as opposed to rejected, yes, they have, you want to let them know. I tend to let things group up a little bit in the hopes that, if we've got one rejection, maybe someone will show interest so I can have some good news to go with the not so good news. But yes, you always, at a certain point, you always have to do a check-in and say, here's where we are. It's at 5 houses that haven't responded, and these are the 3 places that have passed. As far as comments go, if it is a very well-written editorial rejection with substantive comments that are very constructive, I will very rarely cut and paste it and pass it along. Sometimes, well, almost always, I will leave the editor's name off just for privacy's sake. Although, the writer knows because they know who I'm submitting to a particular house. But just I don't know, that's just something I do. But if they just say no and they say, as is sometimes the case, I didn't like the voice, I don't pass that along. I just say it wasn't for them. It wasn't to their taste. Because that's not a constructive comment. You could, they could very easily have said, really interesting idea, nice job, but somehow it didn't speak to me, and so I can't add it to my list, which is another way of saying a lot of things, maybe that were not as nice or as gentle, but I think it's preferable to be nice. Okay, let's see. Let's see. I can't read. I'm not sure what your name. Rizo. You're asking a couple of different things here. YA and women's fiction, should writer mention both, or focus on one genre? And the second is, if main character is 18, it can fall either way. I'm not so sure the 18 rule holds necessarily. I know that the maximum age of a main character is creeping up. But believe it or not, as recently as the time I was at Dutton, which was 2004 to 2007, we could not have a main character in a YA who was older than 16. Now, there were a few exceptions to that, but it was very difficult to get that by. When you say women's fiction, to me, that speaks to adult, as opposed to young adult. So I think that unless I'm not sure how to answer that. I guess I would pick one and go with it. If you think it's an adult novel with a younger protagonist, you should be sending it to adult editors. If you think it's a young adult with a slightly older protagonist, then send it to children's book editors. So, I guess that was our last question. We're going to wrap it up. Thank you all so much. I really enjoyed speaking with you. I hope you got something out of this. Again, to everyone who worked on this, thank you so much.